Sinner's Sacrifice for Redemption is a new indie Dark Souls inspired game. This is an action RPG where you're tasked with defeating a series of boss fights. 7 of the bosses are based on the 7 deadly sins. An interesting concept the game likes to invoke is the nature of losing something to proceed. To enter into a battle with one of these bosses, you will need to lose something of value to you. This creates an interesting concept and one that does capture your attention. The visual imagery is another aspect of the game that definitely invokes a sense of mystery within its visuals, just like the games it's inspired by. The gothic look and dark feel creates a sense of presence that begs to be thought about and discussed. To call this a Dark Souls ripoff is condescending and not accurate to the game. Ripoff would imply that this is a copycat or something of lesser value, but that isn't the case here. While the Souls games have created many memorable experiences, they have also inspired other artists, and this is seen with Sinner. I want to do something a bit different and discuss the opening events of this game and how the game pulls you in its approach to its world and gameplay. Join me as we explore the first area. Sinner opens up with a brief cutscene to help give the player some context into the world.
Consumed the kingdom of Kavanis. Unholy meteors fall from the sky, and darkness overtakes us. I am reborn. None can remember what came before. I can remember only this, that I am branded Sinner, and that I must take the first step to discover the roots of our great sin.
This isn't much to go on from the get-go, but it helps to provide a brief introduction to the game. Then the player assumes control of our hero. We see from these brief shots that we are fully armed and ready for a fight. The player gains control of our avatar, and then we interact with some shadowy figures. These figures act as brief tutorials on how the movement and base attacks are done. Upon interacting with them, ghosts appear to challenge you on this knowledge that you've just gained. After emerging victorious, you make your way to the only path you have and see what awaits you on the other side of the light. When you enter into the new area, you touch one of the relics and then the game finally begins. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to count the first boss fight as the one that you start in front of after exiting the cutscene, even though the game does give you the freedom to tackle them in any order you see fit. I want to focus on this first encounter on how the game does an effective job of engaging the player and teaching us about the gameplay. Before we enter the fight, we are asked to give up something before we proceed. The only way to engage the monster is to submit to this request. Once you do this, your health and stamina take a hit and they're reduced a bit before your fight. We haven't even had a true fight and something is already being taken away from us. The boss fight is a playground of figuring out the ins and outs of the boss and then learning what we have available to us in our arsenal. Since the tutorial prior to this fight was extremely brief, we can see that we have tools at our disposal, but we don't really know what they do. At the start of the fight, I tried to use what I knew so far, my sword and shield. Through defending, I learned that I can stun the boss if I can time my block with their strike, and this opens them up to attack without myself getting hit. This was particularly exciting since this happened by coincidence for me and I did not previously know that I had this ability available to me. As my first attempt continued, I quickly learned that the boss would attempt to hit me with many ranged projectiles with homing effects. Some would just cause damage while others would slowly poison me. This was my first failure, but I was able to take what I had learned from this fight and then bring it into my next try. On my second attempt, I was hit with an attack that I hadn't seen on my first try. The boss would send out this blast that would continually hunt me down. I would try to hide from it like other projectiles, but it would just barrel through any solid surface and just try and attack me. I tried using my shield and the blast would just hit me and do damage. During this encounter, I needed to take some time to reflect on that attack. I felt I had tried a few things that should have worked, but nothing had worked so far. Then I figured since the deadly force appears to be continually coming after me, I figured I would try and roll right into it and maybe that would stop it from hurting me. So I tried this and was successful. This was really satisfying. The game didn't provide me with any on-screen prompts saying, this is what I should do to effectively dodge this attack, but rather I used the tools I had in a different way. This small moment taught me that in future boss fights I need to make sure and assess anything that I previously know, and then maybe need to tweak my strategy just a bit to be able to get through a new encounter. Since the boss is extremely deadly in close range combat, especially if you can't get down the block deflections, I started to toy with some of the other items in my inventory. I had access to 2 projectiles that could give me a good means to hurt the boss and stay out of harm's way. I had these lances, and when timed well, I could stun the boss to hit them with that lance and then be able to go in and get a few sword strikes in. Or I could use the fire bombs, and if the boss decided to stay within the area of effect, it would continually take damage. The last piece of equipment was the ability to turn my sword into a flame sword for a limited period of time. With all this knowledge, I was able to get better at this fight, but the boss had a few more surprises in store for me. After taking a large amount of damage, he would teleport away and try to hit me with this deadly wave that I needed to outrun and then stay on the outer rim of the arena. Within this area, I had less room to dodge his projectiles, and he would summon these slugs that could quickly kill you if too many of them gang up on you. There was more to learn as I progressed. After a few more tries, I used what I had learned and I did manage to defeat them and move on to my next challenge. This entire fight was really memorable because it effectively acted as a tutorial arena, but it didn't feel like a tutorial that held your hands like most games. Yes, you start the game and are essentially up against a boss fight, but this is where you will learn what you have in your arsenal and your moveset along with what the attacks the boss has to use against you. You learn what moves to use to appropriately counter the attacks thrown at you. This creates a really memorable beginning area for the game. The story starts the intrigue along with the visuals, but the gameplay and how mechanics are introduced provide that hook to the player. And while the game does take inspiration from Souls-like games, it does, at least in its beginning area, effectively execute them. Rip-offs are easily seen by its audience, since the audience knows the games and how they work. Inspiration is a combination of paying tribute to what gave you that idea, while combining it with your own talent and unique execution. And Sinner's Sacrifice for Redemption is just that.